Hey, welcome to I Felt the Dark. Thanks for clicking on this video. Today, we're going back 39 years to 1985 to dive into a case that made huge waves back in the day in England. Before we jump in, don't forget to join I Felt the Dark by hitting that subscribe button and leaving a comment after you watch. When the entire Bamber family was found dead in a horrific state, the initial suspicion fell on Sheila, who had schizophrenia. But hidden blood trails and overlooked evidence revealed a much more complex crime than anyone imagined. So who's really behind it? Let's get into the story. Neville was a former Royal Air Force pilot who later became a judge in Essex, England. He was a big guy, standing at 993 centimeters, and was known for being strong and authoritative. In 1949, he married June Pigman, the daughter of a wealthy farmer in the area. After they got married, the couple moved to the White House farm, which was June's family property, passed down to them to manage. After being married for 8 years without having any children, they decided to adopt. They didn't have to wait long. A senior priest named Eric C. picked them from a list of potential adoptive parents. The baby they were going to adopt was the child of Eric's young daughter, Abigail, who got pregnant out of wedlock with her boyfriend. Eric convinced Abigail's boyfriend to give up the baby to the Church of England Children's Society for adoption. Eric chose Neville as the new family for the baby because he knew him from their time in the RAF. 2 weeks after the baby was born, a little girl named Phyllis was officially adopted in October 1957, and her name was changed to Sheila. 7 years earlier, June had suffered from depression and was treated in a psychiatric hospital. A year after Sheila was adopted, June fell ill again and had to undergo electroshock therapy 6 times. Although she got better, she still needed treatment for years, and by 1982, she was under the care of a psychiatrist. When Sheila was 4, they adopted another child, a 6-month-old boy from the same place. The baby, named Jeremy, was the son of a nursing student who had an affair with a married soldier. Because this couple was caught up in their own lives and didn't want to be burdened by a child, especially one from an affair, they decided to give the baby up for adoption. Jeremy was given up to the church when he was just a month old. Neville and June were wealthy farmers with a lot of properties, including a farmhouse, a house in London, 300 hectares of land, and a large camping area. They raised their 2 kids with a lot of love and a privileged lifestyle for that era. However, when the kids started school, Jeremy became jealous, feeling his parents were treating him differently than Sheila. Sheila got to go to a boarding school, but Jeremy, who also wanted to go to a boarding school, was sent to a regular public school instead. It's clear why. Sheila was the daughter of Neville's friend, while Jeremy was adopted, the child of an affair. At public school, Jeremy was often bullied, which made him rebellious because he was frustrated by his classmates' actions. Unable to take it any longer, Jeremy dropped out of school. To cheer him up, Neville paid for Jeremy to go on a holiday to Australia and New Zealand. In Australia, he took a scuba diving course before heading to the next country. However, in New Zealand, a friend accused Jeremy of breaking into a jewelry store and stealing a watch. But this wasn't true. It was just jealousy because Jeremy appeared wealthier and more well-off from the outside. They even said Jeremy was involved in drug smuggling. Jeremy returned to England in 1982 and did odd jobs at a few places before his father eventually asked him to work on the family farm. He got paid $150 a week, which he thought was very little. Even though his pay wasn't much for a rich kid, his dad let Jeremy set up a cottage for free on their land in the Gold Hanger area. The cottage was 5.6 kilometers from White House Farm, a 5-minute drive by car, and 15 minutes by bike. At that time, besides giving Jeremy a car, Neville also gave him an 8% share in the family company that managed the camping area. Still, Jeremy remained jealous of Sheila. She got to live in London with all the luxury, while Jeremy felt stuck on the farm with a low salary. Handsome as he was, Jeremy felt he didn't fit in there and preferred a more luxurious life. On top of all this, he had to deal with Neville's authoritarian and intimidating behavior. With his religious mother, Jeremy didn't get along either, and they often fought to the point where they stopped talking to each other. Jeremy grew up feeling unappreciated and worthless, from being a baby unwanted by his biological parents, to being treated differently from his sister, bullied at school, and constantly fighting with Neville and Jun, all of which took a toll on his mental state. In his early adulthood, Jeremy found out that both of his biological parents had gotten married and had families of their own, but they didn't seem interested in reaching out to him. Feeling abandoned like this slowly turned into hatred, and he secretly started holding a grudge against his biological family. Behind all the luxury and Jeremy's jealousy, his sister Sheila had her own issues. At the time, Sheila was attending secretary school in London. But soon after, she got pregnant by her boyfriend, Colin. Jun, who was very religious, couldn't accept that her daughter was pregnant out of wedlock and demanded that she have an abortion, which only made their relationship worse. As if that wasn't enough, Jun later caught Sheila and Colin sunbathing naked in a field in London, which made Jun furious, calling her a devil child. A little while after that incident, Sheila continued her secretary training and also got trained as a hairdresser. She even worked as a model with the Lucy Clayton agency and spent 2 months in Tokyo. But not long after, Sheila returned to England, and this time, her parents arranged for her to marry Colin in May 1977. Unfortunately, after getting married, she suffered 2 miscarriages before finally giving birth to twin boys named Daniel and Nicholas 2 years later. After her sons were born, Sheila quit modeling and lived on welfare while working as a low-paid waitress. A few months before giving birth to the twins, Sheila found out Colin was cheating on her and decided to separate when the twins were 5 months old. This situation made Sheila, who was already depressed, hurt herself even more. 3 years later, they officially divorced, with shared custody of the kids. After the divorce, her father gave Sheila an apartment in Maida Vale to cheer her up. During this time, Sheila decided to look for her biological mother, who was living in Canada. Unfortunately, after they met at Heathrow Airport, their relationship didn't develop as she had hoped. After that brief reunion, Sheila found herself caught up in a wild lifestyle. Sheila started partying a lot, doing drugs, and hooking up with older guys after she joined her new group of friends, who ended up nicknaming her Bambi. Because of this lifestyle, her modeling career slowly faded, and she started taking any job she could get, even if it didn't pay much. She worked as a waitress at a place called the School Dinner, where she had to wear a sexy schoolgirl uniform. Sheila also worked as a cleaner and even did some adult modeling. By 1993, her health started to go downhill. She got treated by Dr. Hugh, who was also her mom's doctor. She ended up in a private hospital, where they diagnosed her with schizoaffective disorder, which later developed into schizophrenia. From then on, Sheila had to rely on medication she needed to take regularly. For a while after that, Sheila often believed she could communicate with God. At other times, she thought her sons were the children of the devil, or felt like some people were trying to kill her. Because of her unstable health, Sheila and her 2 sons moved back in with her parents on their farm. Meanwhile, Jeremy had a girlfriend named Julie, who was a teacher and sometimes stayed with him at his house. Even though he had a girlfriend, Jeremy couldn't get over his bitterness toward his family. A few times he even talked about murder in front of Julie. But back then, Julie thought he was just joking around and that his stories were just wild fantasies. On August 7, 1985, at 3:26 in the morning, the police got a call from Jeremy. He reported that his dad had just called him in a panic, saying Sheila was going crazy at the house with an automatic gun. The police rushed to the farm because they knew Sheila had a gun. They decided to wait outside and figure out what was going on inside the house. Jeremy showed up not long after, looking super stressed and upset. To calm him down, a cop gave him some tea mixed with alcohol. While they were waiting outside, the police asked Jeremy some questions, and he told them about the call from his dad when Sheila was losing it. He also mentioned that he didn't get along with his sister, and that Sheila had a history of mental illness. After waiting for 2 hours and Sheila still not coming out, at 7:45 in the morning, the police broke down the locked door and went into the house. Inside, they found a horrific scene. In the kitchen, Neville was lying dead in a pool of blood, while his mom, June, and the twin boys were found dead in their bedrooms, each with gunshot wounds to the head while they were asleep. Sheila was also found dead with a wound on her neck, holding onto a gun. Given her mental health history, the police believed Sheila did all this before eventually taking her own life. Right after the incident, the media quickly put the spotlight on the case, with Sheila being painted as the main culprit. But at the funeral, people started noticing Jeremy acting a bit over the top, almost like he was purposely trying to get caught on camera with tears streaming down his face. From the start, Jeremy's cousin Anne, who didn't believe Sheila was the one responsible, started noticing how Jeremy's behavior seemed different depending on whether he was inside or outside the house after his family was killed. When he got back home, Jeremy, who had been putting on a sad face, was actually looking for breakfast and eating heartily. At the funeral, after acting like a grieving son who almost fainted and had to be supported by his girlfriend, his tears disappeared once he was home, replaced by a carefree, cheerful face, laughing and joking around. A few days after the funeral, Jeremy even went on a vacation to Amsterdam with Julie and a friend. While there, it came out that Jeremy threw a party with a lot of drugs involved, and after returning from the trip, he started selling off family belongings, including offering June's car to Julie's mom. The police, who were eager to close the case quickly, frustrated Anne, who felt like she was being forced to accept that her family's death was caused by Sheila, who was supposedly mentally ill. Feeling something was off about this case, she and another cousin, David, quietly started looking into the Bamber family's deaths. A few days after the funeral, David, who was searching for evidence in the Bamber family home, managed to find a gun silencer with bloodstains on the end of it. It was hidden in one of the cupboards in the house. At first, Anne and David were too scared to tell the police about what they had found because they were afraid for their own lives. If Jeremy could get rid of his own family, getting rid of his cousins would be a piece of cake. But eventually, they worked up the courage to hand over the evidence to the police. With the discovery of the silencer, the idea that Sheila had committed suicide didn't make sense anymore, because her arms weren't long enough to hold the gun and shoot herself in the head. The only possibility was that someone else had done it, someone who, after killing all the family members, removed the silencer and hid it before leaving the house. With this new evidence, the police admitted that they had been on the wrong track from the beginning, as the initial investigation was poorly conducted. The crime scene wasn't secured, wasn't thoroughly searched, and evidence wasn't recorded or preserved. A few days after the incident, the police even burned the bed and carpet stained with blood, effectively destroying key evidence. Officers also moved the weapon without wearing gloves, and the fingerprints weren't examined until several weeks later. Another mistake was returning the house keys to Jeremy and his family 3 days after the incident, which allowed anyone to freely enter an area that should have been off limits. The police then reopened the case and searched the crime scene again to look for any other evidence that might still be there. Although they had found the silencer, they still couldn't pin Jeremy as the culprit, so they needed more direct evidence. A month after the incident, Julie, who felt something was off about Jeremy, gave a testimony that made things worse for him. She revealed that Jeremy had been planning everything for a long time. Plus, on the night of the incident around 9:50 p.m., Julie overheard Jeremy talking on the phone with someone. He said, "Tonight or never," but no one knows who he was talking to. Julie reported her boyfriend after remembering what Jeremy had said about wanting to get rid of his family. However, when Julie tried to ask questions, Jeremy seemed reluctant to answer. He said they had to be careful because their house might have been bugged. This made Julie more convinced that Jeremy might have done it all by himself. After hearing this, Julie realized her boyfriend was a cold-blooded psychopath. When she tried to end their relationship, Jeremy hurt her badly. On top of that, Julie found out Jeremy had been cheating on her with another woman. Because of this, Julie decided to firmly testify against the man she once loved. Jeremy was eventually arrested, but a few days later, he was released on bail by his friends. Not long after his release, Jeremy tried to sell his story to a newspaper for $300 million, along with 2D photos of Sheila from her modeling days. Then, he went on vacation with a friend. He told people that Julie was lying and deliberately accusing him. However, when he returned to England, Jeremy was arrested again and charged with mass murder. During the trial, which started on October 3, 1986, the prosecution revealed many inconsistencies in the case. It turned out that Neville, who Jeremy claimed was injured, had never called his son. This was proven by the phone at the Bamber house, which was clean, while Neville's body was covered in red stains. As for Sheila, despite her mental condition, her doctor said she would never hurt her family and kids. Colin, her ex-husband, testified that even though Sheila would throw things when she was unwell, she had never hit anyone and didn't know how to use a gun. Forensic evidence showed several inconsistencies with Sheila, like she wasn't strong enough to overpower her tall, big father, especially when Neville was in good health. Sheila's injured body and clothes also looked relatively clean. The red stains on Sheila's clothes were her own, which suggests that if she had been the perpetrator, her clothes would have had red stains from all the family members. There were no traces of gunpowder residue on her clothes, hands, or nails. Her nails were well maintained and not broken, and her footprints were clean, as if after lying in bed she had never left the mattress. Barbara, Neville's secretary who had known Jeremy since he was a child, said that Jeremy had two contrasting personalities. He could be charming and liked by many, but he also had a tendency to anger and torment others. Barbara recalled that on the Friday before the incident, Jeremy had visited his father at the office. Whatever they discussed, Neville seemed very anxious afterward, as if he had a bad premonition. He told Barbara that he didn't think he would survive the winter that year. A farm worker had also overheard a conversation between Jeremy and Sheila. They were discussing how Jeremy didn't want to share the inheritance with his sister if their parents died. Jeremy had even told one of his uncles that it would be easy for him to get rid of anyone, including his own parents. Based on the evidence and witness statements, the prosecutor attempted to piece together a timeline of events from the night of the incident. According to the prosecutor, on August 6th, 2 days after Sheila moved to the farm, Jeremy visited with the stated intention of discussing the twins with his sister. Since Sheila was ill at the time, Jeremy suggested temporarily placing the children in a nearby orphanage. Sheila refused, not wanting to be separated from her kids. After this discussion, they had dinner with the family, and Jeremy left around 9:30 p.m. One of the farm workers even saw him leaving the house. In the early hours of August 7th, Jeremy returned to the farm through the back door using his mother's bicycle, which he had borrowed a few days earlier. He took a back route to avoid the main road, which might have led to encounters with others. Upon arrival, Jeremy entered through the bathroom window on the ground floor. He then retrieved a silenced gun and went upstairs to kill June, who was sleeping with Neville. When Neville woke up, he tried to grab the weapon but was struck by Jeremy. Although Neville managed to escape, he attempted to protect Sheila and his children, but was killed by Jeremy with numerous wounds on his body. Afterward, Jeremy murdered Sheila and her 2 children, who were sleeping in the room next to their mothers. Jeremy then staged the scene to make it look like Sheila was the perpetrator. He placed a Bible next to Sheila's body to give the impression that the incident was related to religious motives. Realizing that Sheila's hands were not long enough to handle the silenced gun, Jeremy removed the silencer and hid it in a cabinet. He then removed the kitchen phone from its hook, left the house through the kitchen window, and returned home using the bicycle he had brought with him. Arriving home at 3 a.m., Jeremy called Julie, who was at her parents' house, pretending to be unable to sleep due to a strange premonition. Instead of calling emergency services, Jeremy called the police and reported that his father had called him because Sheila was going berserk, aiming to buy time. As a result, when the police arrived at the scene, they were unaware that the Bamber family was already dead. They spent 2 hours trying to communicate with Sheila, who of course could no longer speak. The only sound from inside the house was the barking of a dog. Eventually, the police broke in and found the entire Bamber family deceased. Despite the extensive evidence and witness testimonies, Jeremy still maintains his innocence. On October 28th of the same year, he was sentenced to 5 consecutive life terms in prison, and his face remained expressionless as the verdict was read. 3 years later, Jeremy appealed on the grounds that the judge had influenced the jury, but the appeal was denied. Jeremy did not give up. 8 years later, he filed a motion for reconsideration based on claims of a miscarriage of justice, but this request was also denied. To this day, Jeremy continues to appeal and has yet to receive a final resolution. However, he often tells people that his release is near. Jeremy Bamber is one of 75 prisoners in the UK serving life sentences who could potentially be released. During his time in prison, Jeremy has twice filed claims for inheritance that he believed should be his. Shortly after his arrest, his grandmother removed him from her will. With the entire Bamber family deceased, most of the inheritance went to June's sister. In 2004, Jeremy also claimed benefits from shares in a camping site in the Meldon area, but the court rejected this claim. According to the law, murderers cannot benefit from the assets of their victims. That's all for today's story. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and share it widely on your social media. For those who stuck around until the end, stay tuned for the next crime story. See you.